If you look at contemporary journalism, it's become a punchline. There's no beating around the bush here. The advent of the internet and revenue primarily based through advertising means that most news outlets rely on salacious, often inaccurate and misleading headlines because the content just doesn't matter. As long as you go on that news outlet's website, then they have that ad revenue, and the quality just doesn't matter. You can also blame low consumer standards, meaning it's not very often we see genuine, effective journalism. And in movies you don't see it often either, because a lot of the drama would consist of phone calls, long meetings, slow interviews, and months of typing before potentially going to print. It's not incredibly cinematic. However, Spotlight looks set to buck that trend. Director Tom McCarthy's movie about the Boston Globe's Spotlight journalists investigating widespread child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church between 2001 and 2002 is an Oscar frontrunner and is one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the past year. But is there more to Spotlight than just a good story, or is this story big enough for a movie screen? In 2001, the Boston Globe newspaper hires a new editor, Marty Barron, who stumbles across a potential story about a paedophile priest and commissions the Globe's Spotlight team to investigate. Spotlight, led by Walter Robinson and consisting of Michael Resendez, Sasha Pfeiffer, and Matt Carroll, investigate the Boston Catholic community. When the scale of events becomes apparent, Spotlight try to discover whether or not the cardinals at the top actually knew about the abuse, and whether or not they tried to cover it up. Spotlight is working off of an effective template with the true story that it is portraying. The work that the Spotlight team did for the Boston Globe, which won them the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service, is a fascinating story on its own, so simply portraying that in film would already be a recipe for success. Thankfully, writers Tom McCarthy and Josh Singer dig deeper into the ideas that maybe a lot of people were complicit in the priest's deplorable acts and not just their superiors. Boston is a predominantly Catholic community, and the priests in question targeted children with problem parents in low-income families, as they were less likely to tell others, and their parents were glad that a religious figure of authority in their city was paying attention to them. Also, because the religious organization is so powerful that any attempt to portray them negatively could blow back against the Boston Globe, and they could easily bury the story. But when the actual scale of events is made apparent and the Spotlight team investigate further, they realize that the story has not only been on their doorstep this whole time, but they had all of the pieces years ago and didn't do anything with the information. This is actually where the film stumbles in terms of structure, where the clues are dangled in front of the audience very early on, but the characters don't address this obvious lapse in logic until nearer the end of the film. But Spotlight is a movie that is all about subtlety and grounded emotions. There's one outburst from Mark Ruffalo nearer the end of the movie, but he's really the only character to get a moment like that. There are frequent reveals throughout Spotlight, and the team usually react in silent awe, which feels like a much more natural reaction. It feels more down to earth, and because of the understated reactions and the moments of quiet, you can almost feel the movie-going audience's collective shock at what has transpired when watching Spotlight in a crowded theatre. That quiet is more for the audience than it is for the characters. Because these events really happened, and according to my research, the movie doesn't embellish much, and while the passage of time is another one of the film's structural problems, as how much time passes from scene to scene feels very confusing, as well as there being one instance of the team being told that their deadline is January, even though the audience aren't told what month it currently is, the fact that Spotlight's investigation took as long as it did means that we get a broad look at what happens in terms of reporting a story like this. Everything from interviewing victims, getting approval from a supervisor, having to postpone work because something bigger just came up, deciding whether to print what you already have to get there before the newspapers do, or wait until you have more information. It's just a fascinating process. Part of me actually wishes that Spotlight was longer so it could elaborate even more on the process. It's 129 minutes long, but when you're dealing with a story like this in such an understated nature, then I think you could add another 10 minutes onto that. For example, it feels like Sasha Pfeiffer, played by Rachel McAdams, doesn't get as much to do on screen as the rest of the cast, despite the potential being there. She mentions that she no longer goes to church with her mother because she can't think of Catholicism in the same way after her findings, but it feels like something the audience should have seen as opposed to just being told, especially since another subplot involving Matt Carroll, played by Brian Darcy James, discovering one of the suspected priests lives just down the road from him, does get the necessary screen time. Another Sasha Pfeiffer moment involves a very frank and formal confession on the front door of a priest's house, and then it's never brought up again. It comes across like a bombshell moment, but it doesn't get followed up on. But that's easy to ignore in the moment when you have an ensemble cast this compelling. While Michael Keaton plays the head of the operation, Spotlight is very much a team effort, and there's no singular lead. Each actor gets a relatively similar amount of screen time, and they all get moments to shine. It's also interesting in that the cast aren't really Hollywood types, if that makes sense. Spotlight doesn't try to glamorize the real-life figures in terms of appearance, and they've even cast actors who look scarily similar to their real-life counterparts like Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Liev Schreiber, and Rachel McAdams. But subtlety is the name of the game here, with wonderful minute details in terms of expressions and line delivery from the actors, particularly Mark Ruffalo, who has such a humble on-screen presence, and you can't help but be enraptured by his thought process. Spotlight excels when multiple cast members are sharing the screen and spouting riveting dialogue with each other. Structural problems aside, Spotlight has a very strong screenplay, which balances multiple people over a long stretch of time concerning one topic. It's about a terrible topic, but it's not gratuitous or exploitative, as the audience never actually see the abuse take place. They only hear the first-hand accounts of it from distressed victims. The audience viewpoint rarely leaves the Spotlight team, and that gives the movie a sense of camaraderie. This was a team effort. This is an ensemble cast, and that's where Spotlight is at its most engaging and empathetic. But the directing doesn't really seem to complement that. While Tom McCarthy has done a great job at making 129 minutes of dialogue engrossing, the cinematography from Masanobu Takeyanagi is pretty flat. The locations aren't particularly striking as there are a lot of whites and greys, but that's natural as most of the movie takes place in offices. That's understandable. But it's all about how the camera focuses on the actors. Most of the shots in scenes involving multiple people talking will only have one person in the frame talking to someone off camera. It often feels like the people in question are monologuing to themselves, not taking part in an actual conversation, and since Spotlight is a movie that revels in its ensemble, this is a big issue. It means a lot of key moments feel emotionally distant and detached from the viewer. The best moments in Spotlight are when multiple characters inhabit the same frame and are allowed to work with the accessible and endearing script, which makes this visual choice more disappointing than anything. While Spotlight does feel like a TV movie in terms of its direction, and it just occurred to me that Spotlight would make a phenomenal 5-part drama or something similar, it's still an admirable feat to make good journalism make for compelling cinema. We explore a lot of locations, meet lots of characters, and small details indicating the time period from bulky laptops, flip phones, and seeing Windows XP operating systems are great immersive touches. Incidentally, it's nice to see the makeup team go understated with the cast. No one here is dolled up or made to look like a glamour model, which they could have very easily done. Also, Howard Shore's music, while not bad by any means, is repetitive as hell. Basically, every scene transition in the first half has the same 3 or 4 bars of piano music. It actually gets unintentionally funny at points, and emphasizes the TV movie nature of the production. So, after all of that, here's my conclusion. Spotlight is an effective true story film which delves deeply into one of the most talked about news stories of the 21st century, and it does so without compromising or holding back or diluting the subject matter. It has a terrific ensemble cast that are working perfectly in tandem with each other, and its understated nature and emphasis on quiet revelations and subtle deeds makes the story all the more effective and engaging. But I can't go as far as most critics and call it a 5-star masterpiece, as it has structural problems which really nagged at me, missed potential in regards to many plot points, its setups, and its TV movie isolated cinematography and music. That having been said, Spotlight is still worth checking out and worth experiencing this true story, but in regards to its objective merits, it's not an instant classic. I give Spotlight 3.5 stars out of 5.
We've got 2 stories here. A story about degenerate clergy, and a story about a bunch of lawyers turning child abuse into a cottage industry. Which story do you want us to write? Because we're writing one of them.
Hey folks, thanks for listening to my review. You can find these reviews a day early on my website, so be sure to visit www.trilbee.com regularly, where you can find a written version. I'm just experimenting with a new format, so let me know if you like these audio reviews to complement the written ones. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. But more importantly, what do you think of the film? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more movie related analysis. Please hit that like button, as it really helps me out, and you can support my content through Patreon for exclusive perks and rewards and updates. I'll see you folks next time. Spotlight doesn't try to glamorize the real-life figures in terms of appearance, and they've even cast actors who look scarily similar to their real-life counterparts like Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo,